The thing beneath Kyle's floorboards. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button before something else hits you first. That's how Kyle's story starts. But Kyle wasn't some ghost hunter or a thrill seeker. He was a regular guy, quiet, private, living alone in a small single-story house on the outskirts of Lakewood. Nothing unusual ever happened in that place until the night he heard the first sound. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just a small, dragging whisper beneath the floorboards, like fabric pulling across wood or something breathing slowly. At first, he tried to ignore it. Old houses creak. Pipes expand. Rats scamper. Logical explanations. Always logical. But the sounds kept coming back, and every night they grew stranger. Some nights, it was a low, guttural growl, so faint it almost blended into the hum of the refrigerator. Other nights, it was worse. Much worse. Kyle described it as giggling. High-pitched. Childlike. Echoing from a place no child should be. And every sound came from the same spot. The crawl space beneath his house. He swore he heard small feet running back and forth under the floor. But the floor was solid wood. Nothing should have been able to run underneath it. After 2 weeks of sleep deprivation and rising tension, Kyle finally snapped. "I'm going down there," he said into his phone's camera. "I need to see what's making those sounds." He hated crawl spaces. He wasn't claustrophobic, but the idea of sliding under a house to check pipes or insulation always freaked him out. Still, he grabbed a flashlight, took a deep breath, lifted the small hatch behind his bedroom dresser, and pointed his camera into the dark. The beam of light revealed dust, old insulation, wooden beams, and nothing else. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Kyle hesitated. Then something breathed. Not an animal. Not the wind. Something deeper, wetter, human-like, but wrong. The sound came from the far end of the crawl space, behind a bundle of old pipes. "Hello?" Kyle whispered. No answer. Just the same slow, dragging exhale. He swallowed hard and crawled forward. The farther he moved, the tighter the space became. His elbows scraped wood. His flashlight flickered against cobwebs. Every movement felt like the house was breathing with him. Then came the giggle. Not a child, not quite human, something mimicking a child's laughter, broken, glitching, echoing where no voice should ever echo. Kyle froze. The camera shook in his hand as he whispered, "No, no, no, what is that?" He angled the flashlight toward the sound. Something moved. At first he thought it was a shadow, a trick of the light. But then it shifted again, fast, jerky, wrong. Something hunched or standing. A shape that didn't fit the hallway's geometry. And then, 2 faint glimmers like eyes reflecting his flashlight. He gasped and scrambled backwards so fast his boots kicked up dust. "Get out, get out, get out," he whispered to himself, breath quickening. His foot snagged on a pipe and he fell, the camera crashing beside him. The screen showed nothing but shaking beams and falling dust as Kyle groaned. "I'm stuck, oh God." He twisted, shoving his shoulder against the narrow beam. Panic surged through him. Then the growl returned, louder now, closer. And behind it, the childlike voice again. A whisper so soft it made the hair on his arms stand up. "Come play." Kyle screamed, not from fear, but from the primal instinct to escape something that did not belong beneath the house. He shoved harder, breaking free, dragging himself backward with frantic, jerking movements. The camera caught one last thing as he crawled toward the exit, a pale shape retreating behind the pipes, almost standing upright before melting back into the darkness. He burst from the crawl space hatch, gasping and slamming it shut behind him. Viewers later debated every frame. Some swore they saw a figure, thin, child-sized, but with limbs too long. Others said the voice was proof of 2 entities, one dark, one mimicking a child. And a few pointed out something Kyle didn't know yet. Crawl spaces are considered dead zones, places where sound shouldn't echo and where voices should never come from. But Kyle's ordeal was only beginning. The crawl space that followed him. Kyle didn't sleep that night. He sat on the living room couch with every light on, The crawlspace hatch barricaded with a dresser, 2 chairs, and a stack of books he hadn't touched in years. His hands shook each time he replayed the footage, each time those faint reflective eyes flickered on screen for a split second. He kept telling himself the same thing. It wasn't real. It wasn't real. It wasn't real. But something deep in his gut screamed the truth. That thing knew he was there. That thing saw him. And that thing didn't like being disturbed. By dawn, the house felt colder, not physically, but emotionally. The kind of cold that sinks into the walls. The kind that watches you. Kyle grabbed his keys and left the house without breakfast. He needed answers. Logical ones. He drove straight to Mr. Huxley, the old homeowner who had lived there for 42 years before selling it to Kyle. Huxley now stayed at a retirement home in town. Kyle didn't bother with small talk. I heard something. In the crawl space, he said. Something alive. Or someone. The old man's face drained of color. He didn't blink. Didn't move. Just stared at Kyle like he'd said a forbidden word. Did you ever hear noises under the house? Kyle pressed. Huxley swallowed hard. Yes, he whispered finally. But it wasn't under. Kyle frowned. What do you mean? Huxley leaned closer, lowering his voice. That house was built on an old settlement. Before these streets existed. Before electricity, before anything. The families who lived there buried their dead shallow. Very shallow. Kyle's stomach twisted. You think there are bodies under my house? No. Not bodies. The old man hesitated, eyes darting around the room. Something older. Kyle didn't want to ask, but he had to. What did you hear? Huxley's voice trembled. Running. Whispering. And once laughter. Like a child. But it wasn't a child. He clenched the arms of his wheelchair. I moved because I knew it would eventually try to mimic someone I loved. That's how it gets close. A chill crawled up Kyle's spine. He left shaken, but not convinced. Ancient settlements? Shallow graves? It all sounded like old man superstition. He needed a real expert, not a ghost story. So he called a local pest control company, claiming he heard a raccoon or a stray dog under his house. An inspector, middle-aged, broad-shouldered, confident, arrived within an hour. Won't take long, the man said, pulling on gloves. These old crawl spaces attract all kinds of critters. Kyle waited outside, arms crossed, breath fogging in the cold air. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Kyle called out. Hey, you all right in there? No answer. He crouched beside the hatch and listened. At first, nothing. Then dragging. Slow. Heavier than before. Like something pulling a weight across the beams. Kyle's heart hammered. Sir? You okay? He shouted again. Suddenly, the inspector burst out of the crawl space, gasping like he'd run for miles. He scrambled up, brushing dirt and cobwebs off his clothes, eyes wide and wild. What did you see? Kyle demanded. The man didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the hatch like it might open again. Finally, he whispered, There's nothing living under there. Kyle frowned. Then why did you? There's something, but it's not an animal. His voice cracked. It whispered my name. How did it know my name? Kyle felt his blood run cold. The inspector backed away from the house slowly, shaking his head. You need to leave this place. Tonight. Burn the hatch shut. Do whatever you have to, just don't go under there again. He hurried to his truck and drove off, leaving Kyle alone in the yard. That night, Kyle slept in the living room again, this time with the TV playing static just to fill the silence. But at exactly 3:14 a.m., the static changed. It warped, deepened, like a voice emerging through the static waves. A voice that whispered, Come play. Kyle bolted upright, staring at the screen. His phone buzzed. A notification. Motion detected. From the crawl space camera he installed earlier, but forgot to check. The thumbnail showed something impossible. A pale hand sliding up from between the floorboards. Kyle stopped breathing. He clicked the live feed. The hand was gone, but the floorboards were moving, lifting, like something underneath was pushing upward, trying to get in, trying to get him. And then, The whisper returned, clearer than ever. "Let me out." The thing beneath the floorboards. Kyle didn't remember grabbing his jacket, or his phone, or even unlocking the front door. All he remembered was the sound, that whisper, curling under the floorboards like icy fingers dragging across his spine. He stood outside in the cold night air, breath clouding, eyes fixed on the house windows glowing faintly from the TV static inside. His own home looked wrong now, less like shelter, more like a trap he had narrowly escaped. But Kyle didn't run. Not yet. He needed help. Real help. He called the police. "Sir, you're saying someone is under your house?" the dispatcher asked. Kyle hesitated. "Yes. Someone or something is trying to get out." They arrived fast, 2 officers with heavy flashlights and cautious steps. They checked the perimeter, the crawl space entrance, the windows. Everything looked normal, untouched. One officer knelt down, shining his flashlight directly at the crawl space hatch. "No signs of forced entry," he muttered. Kyle shook his head. "That's because it didn't break in. It was always—" He stopped himself. The officer raised an eyebrow. "Always what?" Kyle swallowed. "Just open it, please." The officers exchanged looks, then removed the hatch cover. A cold wave of air rolled out, unnatural in how still and stale it felt, like air from a sealed grave. The first officer crawled in slowly, muttering into his radio as the beam of his flashlight swept across the beams and dirt floor. After a minute, he called out, "Nothing here. Just dust and—" Then he stopped talking. "Officer?" Kyle shouted. No response. But it wasn't silence. A faint, rhythmic tapping echoed from under the house, like knuckles rapping gently on wood in a pattern. Not random. Almost like a message. The second officer stiffened. "Hey, are you okay down there?" Still no answer. Then a voice floated out. But it wasn't the officer's. It sounded like a child. Soft. Calling from deep in the dark. "Help me." Kyle froze. The officer beside him blanched. "That's not Tom," he whispered. The tapping grew faster. Louder. Now scraping. Dragging. Like something shifting beneath the foundation. Suddenly, Tom crawled out in a panic, face pale, eyes wide. Not with fear, but confusion. "There's someone down there," he rasped. "But I couldn't see them. I heard them whispering. My name." How did it know? He didn't finish. Because all 3 of them heard it, the whisper rising again from the crawl space. Only this time, it was 3 voices at once overlapping, mismatched, echoing wrong. "Stay. Stay with us. Kyle, stay." The officers backed away. "That's it," the second officer said. "We're calling backup. You're not staying here tonight." But Kyle's attention snapped to his phone. It was vibrating nonstop. Notifications exploding across the screen. Motion detected. Motion detected. Motion detected. Living room camera. Motion detected. Hallway camera. Kyle's blood ran ice cold. Something was moving inside his house. And the cameras were catching it. He opened the first feed. The living room. The TV's static flickered, distorted, then went black. The hallway feed opened on its own. The floorboards were shifting, lifting, as if something underneath were crawling between the walls. Kyle stumbled back, unable to breathe. The officers heard it too, the soft creaking, the wood bending like something pressing upward, testing every weak spot. Then, a voice whispered through the phone speaker. "Come home. I'm waiting." Kyle dropped the phone. That was his mother's voice. But she'd been gone for years. And whatever was under the house knew that. One of the officers grabbed his arm. "We're leaving. Now." They escorted him to the patrol car as the whispering grew louder behind them, now crawling through the vents, resonating through the glass panes, echoing like dozens of voices layered on top of each other. Kyle refused to look back. But as the car pulled away, he couldn't stop himself. Through the living room window, something was standing. Tall. Thin. Head bent sideways as if listening. It didn't move. It only watched. And as the car turned down the street, Kyle saw the final, impossible thing. The thing lifted a hand and waved at him, the same slow, unnatural wave that boy in Chapter 1 had given before running into the snow. Except this time, its fingers were too long, its arm bent in too many places, and its eyes glowed a soft, reflective blue, like something that had lived underground, waiting, listening, learning the voices of the living. The officers kept driving.
Kyle didn't speak.
He knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever lived beneath that house wasn't done with him. It never wanted to be freed. It wanted a voice, a face, a life to mimic. And it had chosen his.